What happens when one of Britain's most beloved comedic geniuses walks onto a daytime talk show and gets ambushed by a host with an axe to grind? In just 30 seconds, a simple question about his career turned into the most explosive exit in Loose Women history. The studio lights were bright that afternoon as Rowan Atkinson settled into the purple chair on the Loose Women set. He'd come to talk about his latest theater project, a serious dramatic role that showed a different side to the man millions knew as Mr. Bean. The panel that day included Denise Welch, Nadia Sawalha, Kay Adams, and Janet Street Porter. The audience clapped warmly as he took his seat, smiling that familiar, gentle smile. He looked relaxed, comfortable even. This was supposed to be friendly territory. A daytime chat show, some light conversation about his work. Maybe a funny anecdote or two. The kind of interview he'd done 100 times before. The makeup artists had been lovely backstage. The production assistants helpful and kind. There was no reason to expect what was about to unfold. Nadia smiled warmly at him from across the table. "It's lovely to have you here, Rowan. We're all big fans." Kay nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. My kids grew up watching Mr. Bean. They still quote lines from Blackadder at the dinner table." Rowan's eyes crinkled with genuine pleasure. "That's wonderful to hear. It never gets old, knowing that something you created has become part of people's lives." Janet Street Porter leaned forward. "And now you're taking on Shakespeare. That's quite a leap, isn't it?" "Well, not really a leap," Rowan replied thoughtfully. "I studied at Oxford. Did quite a bit of classical theater there, actually. In some ways, this feels like coming home." The conversation was flowing naturally, warmly. The audience was engaged, leaning in to hear more. This was how these interviews were supposed to go. But Denise had been quiet, unusually so, watching Rowan with an expression that was difficult to read. Denise Welch sat at the head of the table, already wearing an expression that suggested she had other plans for this interview. Before Rowan could even get comfortable, she leaned forward with a sharp look in her eyes. "So, Rowan," Denise began, her voice carrying an edge that caught everyone off guard. "You're here to talk about this play. This serious play. But let's be honest. Do you really think people can take you seriously after spending decades pulling funny faces?" The studio went quiet. The warmth evaporated from the air in an instant. It was like someone had opened a window in winter and let all the cold rush in. Rowan blinked, processing what he'd just heard. Nadia Sawalha shifted uncomfortably in her seat, glancing between Denise and their guest. The audience members looked at each other, confused by the sudden shift in tone. Even the crew seemed to freeze. Camera operators glanced at each other uncertainly. The floor manager's expression showed concern. This wasn't what anyone had expected. Rowan maintained his composure, responding calmly. "Well, I think actors are allowed to explore different facets of their craft. Comedy and drama aren't mutually exclusive. Some of the finest performers in history have moved between both genres quite seamlessly." He kept his voice level, professional, giving Denise the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps it was just an awkwardly phrased question. Perhaps she was trying to be provocative in a way that would make for good television. He was willing to engage with the question seriously. Denise cut him off before he could finish. "But you're not really an actor, though, are you? You're a comedian. There's a difference. A big difference." There it was again. That edge. That dismissiveness. Nadia's eyes widened. She could see where this was heading, and she didn't like it one bit. Rowan paused, choosing his words carefully. "I would respectfully disagree with that distinction. Comedy is acting. It requires the same understanding of character, the same emotional truth, the same technical skills." Kay Adams tried to interject. "Denise, I think what Rowan's trying to say is—" "I'm talking to our guest, Kay," Denise snapped, not even looking at her co-host. She kept her eyes fixed on Rowan. "I mean, let's call a spade here. You've made millions acting like a child for the camera. Now suddenly you want to be taken seriously? Isn't that a bit convenient?" The audience was silent now, the atmosphere thick with tension. Rowan's expression remained pleasant, but there was a firmness growing in his voice. "I'm not sure I understand what you're getting at, Denise. Are you suggesting that comedy is somehow less valid than other forms of performance?" His tone was still polite, still measured, but there was a firmness creeping in now. A line was being drawn. Denise laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the studio. "I'm suggesting that you can't have it both ways. You can't spend your whole career being a clown and then expect people to see you as Laurence Olivier." Several audience members gasped audibly. This wasn't playful banter. This wasn't even tough questioning. This was something else entirely. Janet Street Porter finally spoke up, her distinctive voice cutting through the tension. "Hang on a minute, Denise. That's completely unfair. Some of the greatest actors in history have done comedy and drama. Robin Williams, Peter Sellers, Alec Guinness." She was trying to diffuse the situation, to bring some balance back to the conversation. But Denise wasn't interested in balance. "Stay out of this, Janet," Denise said coldly. "I'm having a conversation with Rowan." Janet's mouth fell open slightly. She'd been shut down on her own show, dismissed like a child interrupting adult conversation. Her face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. "It doesn't sound like a conversation," Janet fired back, finding her voice again. "It sounds like an attack." Kay Adams was shaking her head now, visibly distressed by how the interview was unfolding. She'd worked with Denise for years, but she'd never seen her like this. So aggressive, so personal, so determined to make someone uncomfortable. Denise ignored her, turning back to Rowan with renewed vigor. "Let me ask you something else. Your show, Mr. Bean, it's basically just you acting stupid for 20 minutes. My 5-year-old nephew could do that. What exactly is the skill there?" The audience gasped louder this time. Some people started murmuring to each other. This was crossing a line, and everyone in the studio knew it. You could feel the collective discomfort, the secondhand embarrassment radiating through the room. Rowan's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained measured. His years of training, of performing under pressure, served him well in this moment. "I think you're being deliberately reductive, Denise. Physical comedy requires enormous precision, timing, and understanding of human behavior. It's actually quite technical. Every gesture, every expression, every movement has to be calibrated perfectly. Charlie Chaplin rehearsed single scenes hundreds of times to get them exactly right. He was trying to educate, to explain, to help her understand. Even now, even under attack, he was attempting to engage honestly with what she was saying. "Technical," Denise repeated mockingly, drawing the word out. "That's a fancy word for mucking about, isn't it? Let's not pretend it's something it's not." Nadia Sawalha had heard enough. She wasn't going to sit there silently anymore. "Denise, this is really inappropriate. Rowan is our guest. We invited him here. He came in good faith to talk about his work, and you're being incredibly rude." Nadia's voice was steady, but you could hear the anger underneath. She was known for being warm, for being diplomatic, but there were limits to what she would tolerate. "And he's getting exactly what he signed up for," Denise shot back, her voice rising slightly. "An honest conversation. Or would you prefer we just blow smoke up his backside like every other interview he does? Is that what we're supposed to do? Just fawn over him?" Rowan remained remarkably calm, though his eyes had grown steely. The politeness was still there, but it was now a shield, a way of maintaining control in a situation that was rapidly spiraling. "I came here to discuss my work in the theater. If you'd like to have an honest conversation about that, I'm happy to engage. But if you're simply interested in being provocative for the sake of it, then perhaps we should end this now." He'd given her an out, a way to reset, to change course, to salvage what was left of the interview. Any reasonable person would have taken it. Denise leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms defensively. "Oh, so you're going to pull the 'I'm too important for this' card. How very predictable. How very celebrity." The other panelists exchanged looks of disbelief. This was beyond saving now. The interview had transformed into something toxic, something that nobody wanted to be part of. "That's not what I said at all," Rowan replied, his patience clearly wearing thin but still holding. "I'm simply pointing out that you seem more interested in attacking me than actually having a discussion. There's a difference between challenging questions and personal insults." His voice was quiet but firm. Every word carefully chosen, deliberately measured. He wasn't going to lose his temper. He wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. Kay Adams attempted damage control, her voice almost pleading now. "Let's maybe reset here. Take a breath. Rowan, and tell us about the play. What drew you to this particular role? What's it been like working with the director?" She was trying so hard to steer the ship back on course, to give everyone a chance to move past this awkward, uncomfortable moment. But it was too late for that. But Denise wasn't done. She had more to say, more points to make, more wounds to inflict. "No, I want to finish this point. You see, Rowan, what bothers me is the hypocrisy. You've made a fortune, an absolute fortune, doing the easiest job in entertainment, making faces and falling over. And now you want the respect that serious actors have earned through years of challenging work, through years of actually acting." Her words hung in the air like poison. The crew had stopped pretending to work, all eyes on the unfolding disaster. The audience sat frozen, unsure whether to intervene, to boo, to do anything at all. Janet Street Porter slammed her hand on the table, the sound echoing like a gunshot through the studio. "That is completely out of order, Denise. Completely out of order. I don't know what's got into you today, but this is disgraceful." Her voice shook with anger. Janet was known for being direct, for not mincing words, but even she seemed shocked by what was happening. "I agree," Nadia added, her voice rising with emotion. "This is embarrassing. This is absolutely embarrassing. Rowan, I am so sorry. This is not who we are. This is not what we do." Tears were actually forming in Nadia's eyes. She felt personally responsible, ashamed to be sitting at that table, associated with what was happening. Rowan held up a hand, a gesture of peace, of understanding. "It's quite all right. Though I must say, Denise, your characterization of my work is not only insulting, it's fundamentally ignorant. Physical comedy is one of the oldest and most respected forms of performance. Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, Jacques Tati, Marcel Marceau, these were masters of the craft. To dismiss it as mucking about shows a startling lack of understanding of performance art, of cinema history, of the very medium you claim to work in." His words were precise, cutting, but delivered without malice. Just facts. Just truth. He was setting the record straight, not out of ego, but out of respect for the art form and for all those who had practiced it. Denise's face flushed red, her neck blotching with color. "Don't you dare lecture me about understanding. Don't you dare sit there and lecture me. I've been in this industry for 30 years. 30 years. I've worked with everyone. I know what real acting looks like." Her voice had risen to almost a shout now. The mask had slipped completely. Whatever she'd been trying to prove, whatever point she'd been trying to make, had dissolved into raw emotion. "Then perhaps it's time you learned something new about it," Rowan said quietly, his politeness now edged with steel, sharp as a blade. "Because what you've demonstrated today is a profound ignorance, not just of my work, but of the entire history of performance." The audience erupted in scattered applause, quickly silenced by Denise's glare. But the damage was done. They'd shown their allegiance. They'd chosen a side, and it wasn't hers. "How dare you?" Denise hissed, her voice low and venomous. How dare you come on this show and disrespect me? In front of everyone. In front of the cameras. She was shaking now, whether from anger or from the realization of what she'd done. It was hard to tell. Her hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. I'm disrespecting you? Rowan's eyebrows rose in genuine amazement. That's remarkable. That's truly remarkable. The lack of self-awareness is actually breathtaking. Kay tried again to salvage the interview, her voice desperate now. Look, everyone, let's just take a breath here. Let's all calm down and... No, Kay, Denise interrupted, her voice cracking slightly. Let him speak. Let Mr. High and Mighty explain to all of us how pulling faces is actually art. Go on. Enlighten us all with your superior knowledge. Rowan stood up slowly, removing his microphone pack. The studio went dead silent. You could hear the cameras still rolling, capturing every second. I think we're done here, Rowan said calmly. Denise, I came here in good faith to talk about my work. Instead, you've spent the entire time demeaning my career, insulting my intelligence, and trying to provoke a reaction. I won't give you the satisfaction. Oh, sit down, Denise scoffed. Don't be so dramatic. The irony of that statement is apparently lost on you, Rowan replied. He turned to the other panelists. Nadia, Kay, Janet, it was lovely to meet you. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to have an actual conversation. Janet stood up too. Rowan, please don't go. This isn't how we normally conduct ourselves. Nadia was also on her feet now. Denise, apologize. Right now. I'll do nothing of the sort, Denise snapped. If he can't handle a few tough questions, then maybe he's not ready for serious acting after all. Rowan paused, turning back to face Denise one last time. His voice was quiet, but carried to every corner of the studio. You know what's truly sad about this, Denise? You had the opportunity to have a genuine conversation with someone who spent 40 years honing their craft. Instead, you chose to be cruel. Not clever, not provocative, just cruel. And you've done it in front of a live audience and cameras. I feel sorry for you, genuinely, because this says far more about you than it ever could about me. Denise's face went from red to white. Get out then. Go on. Run away. I'm not running, Rowan said simply. I'm choosing not to participate in whatever this is. There's a difference. He turned and walked toward the studio exit. The audience sat in stunned silence. Kay Adams had her head in her hands. Nadia Sawalha was glaring at Denise with unconcealed fury. Janet Street Porter just shook her head in disbelief. But Denise wasn't finished. As Rowan reached the edge of the set, she called out loudly, That's right. Walk away. Just like you walked away from real acting all those years ago. Rowan stopped. For a moment, it looked like he might turn around. The entire studio held its breath. Then, he simply continued walking, disappearing behind the cameras and into the backstage area. The second he was gone, chaos erupted on the panel. What the hell was that? Janet demanded, turning on Denise. That was journalism, Denise replied defensively. That was asking real questions instead of the softball nonsense everyone else gives celebrities. That was bullying, Nadia said firmly. Pure and simple. You bullied that man from the moment he sat down. Kay finally lifted her head. She's right, Denise. That wasn't tough questioning. That was an ambush. And it was painful to watch. Oh, please, Denise said, though her voice had lost some of its conviction. He's a grown man. He can handle it. But why should he have to? Janet asked. He came here as our guest. We're supposed to make guests feel welcome, not attack them for no reason. The floor manager was frantically signaling to the producers, unsure whether to cut to commercial or keep rolling. The audience sat in uncomfortable silence, many whispering among themselves. You're all being ridiculous, Denise insisted, but her hands were shaking slightly as she reached for her water glass. I asked him some challenging questions. If he can't handle that, then maybe Janet's right. Maybe he isn't ready for serious roles. You didn't ask challenging questions, Nadia said, her voice steady but angry. You insulted his entire body of work. You called what he does easy. You compared him to your 5-year-old nephew. That's not journalism, Denise. That's just nasty. Kay nodded. And the way you dismissed his response, the way you mocked him when he tried to explain the technical aspects of physical comedy, that was completely uncalled for. I was making a point, Denise argued weakly. What point? Janet demanded. That you can be rude to someone for 10 minutes straight? Congratulations. No point proven. The floor manager finally got word from the control room. He made a cutting motion across his throat. They were going to commercial. But before they could cut away, Denise had one more thing to say. Fine. You all think I was too hard on him, but someone needs to hold these people accountable. Someone needs to ask the questions everyone's thinking. Nobody was thinking those questions, Nadia said flatly. Those were your thoughts, your issues. You projected them onto him, and you did it in the cruelest way possible. I agree, Kay added. And honestly, Denise, I'm ashamed to have been sitting here while that happened. We should have stopped it sooner. Janet leaned forward, looking directly at Denise. You know what the worst part is? Rowan Atkinson is one of the most respected performers in Britain. He's beloved. He's talented. He's been nominated for countless awards. He's performed at the highest levels of theater and television. And he came here, to our show, to talk about his new project. And you treated him like garbage. The audience began to applaud, softly at first, then louder. They were applauding Janet, applauding the other panelists for standing up to Denise. The message was clear. Denise looked around at her co-hosts, at the audience, at the cameras still rolling. For the first time since the interview began, she seemed to realize that she'd made a terrible mistake. Her mouth opened, then closed. No words came out. Backstage, Rowan Atkinson was already gathering his things, politely declining the frantic apologies from various producers and assistants. His face remained calm, though those who knew him well could see the hurt behind his eyes. He'd faced hecklers before, dealt with critics, weathered bad reviews. But this felt different. This felt personal and pointless. One of the younger production assistants approached him nervously. Mr. Atkinson, I just want to say, I'm so sorry. That was completely wrong. Everyone back here is mortified. Rowan gave her a kind smile. It's not your fault, dear. These things happen. But it shouldn't have happened, she insisted. You didn't deserve that. Perhaps not, Rowan agreed. But I suspect Ms. Welch is having a rather difficult time out there right now. Sometimes people lash out when they are unhappy with themselves. It's unfortunate, but it's human. The assistant looked amazed that he could be so gracious after what had just occurred. Mom, you're being very understanding. What's the alternative? Rowan asked gently. Getting angry? Holding a grudge? Life's too short, and I have a play to prepare for. Back on set, the floor manager was counting down to the end of the commercial break. The panelists sat in tense silence. Denise stared at the table in front of her. Nadia, Kay, and Janet exchanged glances, clearly wondering how they were going to proceed with the rest of the show. When they came back on air, Kay Adams took the lead. Her voice was professional, but strained. Welcome back to Loose Women. As you've just seen, we had a rather difficult moment with our guest Rowan Atkinson, who has left the building. Janet jumped in. And I think we need to be very clear about what happened there. That was not okay. The way our guest was treated was not okay. And on behalf of this panel, or at least 3/4 of it, I want to apologize to Rowan and to everyone watching at home. Nadia nodded vigorously. Absolutely. That was not the standard we hold ourselves to. Or at least, it's not the standard we should hold ourselves to. All eyes turned to Denise. She sat frozen, her jaw set, her eyes defiant, but also showing the first signs of understanding the magnitude of what she'd done. The show's producer was already on the phone with executives. Social media was exploding. Within minutes, the clip would be everywhere. People would dissect every word, every expression, every moment of the confrontation. And the verdict was already clear. In the court of public opinion, Rowan Atkinson had conducted himself with grace and dignity in the face of unprovoked hostility. He'd remained calm when attacked, eloquent when insulted, and had chosen to remove himself from a toxic situation rather than escalate it. He'd shown the kind of class that can't be taught or faked. Denise Welch, on the other hand, had revealed something ugly. Her behavior had been indefensible. Her questions designed not to illuminate, but to wound. She'd treated a guest with contempt and had been called out for it by her own colleagues on live television. The rest of the show limped along awkwardly. The panel tried to move on to other topics, but the energy was gone. The audience remained subdued. Every conversation felt hollow compared to what had just transpired. During another commercial break, Kay turned to Denise. "You need to say something. You need to acknowledge what happened." Denise's voice was small. "What do you want me to say?" "An apology would be a start," Janet said bluntly. "To who? He's gone." "To the audience," Nadia said. "To viewers. To your colleagues who had to sit here and watch you self-destruct." When they returned from break, Denise finally spoke. Her voice lacked its earlier confidence. "I want to address what happened earlier. I asked Rowan Atkinson some questions that were perhaps more confrontational than they needed to be." "Perhaps?" Janet interjected. "Denise, come on." Denise swallowed hard. "I asked him questions that were inappropriate and disrespectful, and I'm sorry that he felt he needed to leave." "That's not good enough," Kay said quietly. "You're sorry he felt he needed to leave? How about being sorry for what you said to him?" The audience began to murmur in agreement. Denise looked cornered. "I'm sorry for my approach," she said finally. "I crossed a line." It was barely an apology, more of an admission forced out under pressure. But it was all she could manage. The rest of the show crawled by until the closing credits finally rolled. As the studio emptied out, the crew members talked in hushed tones. They'd witnessed something extraordinary, a complete meltdown of professional courtesy. A guest driven off, set by hostile questioning, a panel turning on one of its own members in defense of that guest. The story would spread quickly. Video clips would circulate. Think pieces would be written. Media analysts would debate the ethics of ambush interviews. Fan communities would rally around Rowan Atkinson, celebrating how he'd handled the situation with such poise. And at the center of it all was a simple truth that everyone in that studio understood. Denise Welch had let her own issues, whatever they were, cloud her judgment. She'd taken out some personal frustration on a man who'd done nothing to deserve it. She'd turned what should have been a pleasant conversation about art and performance into a confrontation that served no purpose except to satisfy her own need to feel powerful. But power, as the afternoon had proven, isn't found in tearing others down. It's found in building them up, in asking thoughtful questions, in creating space for genuine dialogue. Rowan Atkinson had shown real power by walking away, by refusing to engage with cruelty, by maintaining his dignity when someone else had lost theirs. The purple chairs sat empty now, the studio lights dimmed. But the impact of what had happened would linger long after everyone had gone home. It would become one of those television moments that people remembered, discussed, and analyzed for years to come. Not because it was entertaining in the way Denise had perhaps hoped it would be, but because it was a stark reminder of what happens when basic respect and professional courtesy are abandoned, when the pursuit of conflict overtakes the pursuit of conversation, when a host forgets that their job is to facilitate discussion, not to dominate and diminish their guests. In the end, the incident had revealed exactly what Rowan Atkinson had said it would. Far more about Denise than it ever could about him, and that revelation was not flattering.